As the Belt and Road Forum draws to a close, we'll be looking at how SMEs can already reap the benefit of this gigantic initiative that's likely to affect the world's economic structure. And now that Emmanuel Macron is firmly ensconced in the Elysee Palace, we'll be asking how the new French president can make good on his pledges to reunite the country. Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. The Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation has concluded on Monday. A total of 68 nations have signed cooperation agreements with China. Now, the forum attracted 29 foreign heads of state and government, as well as high-ranking delegates from over 130 countries. A joint communique was reached with a roadmap and an action plan of the Belt and Road Initiative in the near future. So what difference will this forum make for millions of small and medium-sized traders around the world, and how to tap into the huge reservoir of resources that are available? I'm very pleased to be joined by Arantxa Gonzalez, Executive Director of the International Trade Center, or the ITC. It's a subsidiary organization of the World Trade Organization and the United Nations, which provides trade-related technical assistance for small businesses. Before our discussion, let's take a look at remarks from President Xi Jinping on the forum.
The forum is a high-level gathering of the international community with a focus on the development of the Belt and Road. We have heard talks on cooperation progress, built consensus, and indicated direction for future cooperation with a roadmap and an action plan. This forum has sent a positive message to the rest of the world that we will work together to advance the Belt and Road Initiative to build a community and a shared future for mankind.
A very fruitful forum, and Ms. Gonzalez, you were there during these forums. Now, first of all, tell us, what is your impression of this Belt and Road Initiative? I know you have 20 years in business, in trade and development, especially for the developing world, and you were also intimately involved in the WTO Aid for Trade over the past 8 years. What is special of this initiative, and what is your take on that?
I think there are three reasons why this initiative is special. And I want to use three S's. Okay. S number one, size. The number of countries covered, but more importantly, the means available to do good through this One Belt, One Road. It's the largest program ever launched to help develop other economies after the Second World War's Marshall Plan. Second S, South. It's coming from a southern partner. It's not coming from the traditional northern partners in development cooperation. It's coming from the south. That's China.
Meaning a developing country.
A developing country.
Yes.
Three is the scope. It's hard infrastructure, it's soft infrastructure, and you said it, it's small and medium enterprises, it's entrepreneurship, it's quality laboratories. And three, and this is the most important ingredient, also is about people to people. It's culture, it's education, it's putting the economy at the service of the individual.
Very interesting, three S's, so size, south, and scope. How does that translate into the kind of cooperation, specific cooperation, the ITC can launch with this initiative? I understand you signed an agreement with China's Ministry of Commerce just yesterday. What this agreement is about?
Well, this agreement is about basically taking our cooperation to the next level. It's about stepping up our cooperation. Why? Because the needs out there are very big, and we have to make sure we respond to those needs. You see, 30 years ago, the ITC was working in China for China. 30 years later, ITC works with China for other countries. Why is this? One, because China has demonstrated through its own experience how important trade and investment, which is central to this One Belt, One Road, has been to its own development. China has seen its economy multiply, its people lifted out of poverty through infrastructure, hard, soft, and through a focus on people. And this is what China wants to do now, working with ITC. And ITC has a good track record, a proven track record in producing results on the ground. We helped 30 years ago Chinese exporters of flowers, Chinese exporters of rice, Chinese exporters of textiles. And it's only fair that 30 years later, ITC and China work together to help other countries follow that same path.
And possibly also to help small and medium-sized traders to expand their trade. I know you wrote an article before the forum, and the title is "With the Belt and Road, the world's economic center of gravity returns to Asia." And you said in the article, SMEs are central to ensuring that the gains from trade are broadly shared across society, including by women and youth. And competitive and internationally integrated SMEs can confer inclusive growth across the new Silk Road. What has to be done to help SMEs become competitive and internationally integrated?
Well, we have to help them connect. We know that when SMEs participate in international trade, they become more competitive. And we also know that only the most competitive survive in international trade. So competitiveness through exposure to international competition is a bit what we are trying to do through this One Belt, One Road initiative. Now, more than 90% of businesses in any country are small and medium enterprises. And their biggest problem is that connecting to international markets is too costly. It's too expensive. There are too many barriers. Some are hard infrastructure, but some are policies, structures, institutions in the country that are not good enough, and quality of the goods and services that the SMEs can offer that are not up to international markets. So if we work on these two, hard and soft infrastructure, we will, by default, be helping connect the small and medium enterprises to markets. And let's not forget what that means. That means jobs. Jobs for the youth, jobs for the women that are disproportionately disconnected from international markets.
And that's connectivity is exactly the key word of this Belt and Road initiative. If we have business, small and medium-sized enterprises watching us, what can they do already at this particular moment? I mean, the project sounds, the initiative sounds so big with, you know, huge infrastructure, high-speed railways and all of that. What can small businesses already start doing?
First is get ready. They need to get ready to participate in this new world where connectivity will be easier. They need to plan ahead, because competitiveness is not built in one day or in 1 week or in 1 year. It's a constant thrive. The second thing I would say is get more engaged with technology. Technology is driving globalization today. They need to embrace technology, whether in the form of electronic commerce. It's 13% of international trade today and growing.
Yes.
Whether it is to improve your productivity, embrace technology. And 3, change your mindset. Don't think that crossing borders is only for the big guys. Don't think that going international is only for the brave. Do that. You can also do that. Change your mindset.
What about the role of women? And I know you're a very outspoken supporter of women's role and what they can do to change society. How can this initiative empower women, and what can women take out of this initiative around the world?
Well, the first thing is that we know today women are more disconnected from international markets than men. Women entrepreneurs, only 2 out of 5 are connected to international markets. So if we lower the barrier to participating in international market, we will be already helping women be part of the economy, and that is good. Women being part of the economy is good for the economy. It grows better, stronger, faster. It's good for business. Business become more productive, but it's good for societies. When women earn an income, they reduce poverty faster, because the way in which they spend their money goes mostly to her family, to their families and their communities. So invest in connecting women to international trade. It will give a return to your economy.
Let's not forget this initiative is not just about building roads. Basically, it's all around cooperation, right? We have education, let's not forget, we have healthcare, and all of these will help empower women and girls to participate in business and the social life. We don't really have much time, but I really want to hear how you respond to some of the concerns about this initiative. There are all kinds of suspicion and skepticism, but some people, for instance, are worried that the Belt and Road is a one-way traffic. For instance, we have these trains linking China with Europe, and some people are saying you have 5 trains a week. They would bring a lot of goods to Europe, but only with 1 train full of freight coming back to China. What is your, is that a one-way traffic we're talking about?
Well, I would just simply refer to the words I heard from the mouth of President Xi yesterday in the forum. He was very clear that the One Belt, One Road is not a one-way street, that it's about mutual exchanges, it's two-way, it's multiple-way, by the way, but I will also go to the very basics of this initiative, which is that it will take a little bit of time. So I think we have to trust what we have heard from China. I heard the president say he wants to have an annual import fair. He gave target figures for how much China wants to import every year from third countries. I would take this at face value, and I would, if China doesn't deliver, I would come back and take China to stake on these words. But first, let's trust the word we heard from the president.
Sure, and I think China announced it to the world. It's not going to eat its own words so easily. Last thing, some people are also saying that the Belt and Road Initiative is causing loss of jobs in a lot of countries, especially in developed countries. When China exports its excessive but high quality capacity, it's causing a lot of local jobs to be lost. What's your reaction on that?
But again, I think we have to give a bit of a space for the initiative to work. For now, what we know is that in the 2 places where this rolled out, which is in the corridor that will connect China to Pakistan, to the Indian Ocean, and in the other initiative between Russia, Mongolia and China, there is a lot of excitement. There is a lot of companies that are getting already ready to trade. So let's give it a bit of time. I think let's get our companies and our workers ready to participate in these new markets. Let's invest in education, in skills, in vocational training, so that at the end of the construction of the infrastructure, we also have the human infrastructure ready to go.
As you said in your article, and I want to wrap it up with this sentence, China and its partners have a chance to lay the foundation for SMEs to benefit from the new trade highways in Asia, Africa and the world. Thank you very much, Arantxa Gonzalez, Executive Director of the International Trade Center. And here is my first point. As I, for one, I quite like the idea that I can order anything for a very reasonable price online from any corner of China. If that is possible, why should I not expect to be able to do that from sellers from around the world? With the boom of online shopping and the logistics that make this possible, billions of individual customers and sellers can be connected directly. Imagine with a click of the mouse, I can order some Thai rice or a Persian carpet without having to pay through the nose, and what opportunities that would bring to potential sellers in Thailand or Iran or everywhere else for that matter. The Belt and Road could be the answer we have all been waiting for. Now that it has a roadmap, the challenge is to translate it into reality. It's early days and everybody will need to invest into this project in order for it to come to fruition. You're watching The Point. I'll be back right after this short break. Welcome back. Emmanuel Macron was sworn in as French president on Sunday. His victory was greeted with signs of relief against the backdrop of rising populism in the West. However, Macron may see more challenges ahead. In the half-presidential and half-parliamentary system in France, Macron is now focusing on the upcoming parliamentary election in June. Will his centrist party, which has never held a single seat in parliament, win the election to ensure he can deliver his promise to reunite France? I'm crossing live now with François Godeman in Paris, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, and Rassan Maxwell, an Associate Professor from the University of North Carolina. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. First of all, let me give you the very latest news announced by Alexis Kohler, who is the French President's Secretary General, that Emmanuel Macron has appointed Edouard Philippe as Prime Minister. Edouard Philippe is a 46-year-old. He is a conservative lawmaker and mayor of Le Havre in France since 2020. He will be in charge of forming a government on Wednesday. So, gentlemen, let me ask you your impression on this. Mr. Godeman, what is your first reaction to the choice of Edouard Philippe as Prime Minister of France?
I think it's a coup for President Macron. It's not only Edouard Philippe, it's the fact that Edouard Philippe was the right-hand man for the most popular politician on the right, who unfortunately could not run for the presidential election because he was defeated by people further right, but he's still the more popular in France. There will presumably be other ministers from the right tomorrow. That means that Mr. Macron, after splitting apart the Socialist Party, is now splitting apart the conservative right. People are coming to his government before the legislative elections, and that will undoubtedly help his party in the coming test.
Professor Maxwell, what's your take on the choice of Edouard Philippe as Prime Minister?
I agree with my colleague, and it's also interesting to note, as you say, his party technically does not exist. It's a new party. He's cobbling together people from different parties, and so it will be very interesting to see how he can form some sense of a cohesive party over the next weeks and months. And this is a first step showing that he's going to be leaning towards the right, which we've already been seeing in the number and the people that he's been enlisting as candidates for the legislative elections. And so his formation of a party is going to be one of the big issues in the next weeks and months.
Yeah, first of all, some technical information here. For instance, Macron will have to win half of the 577 National Assembly seats, but his centrist party, or La République en Marche, which means the Republic Moving Forward party, never held a single seat in Parliament. As Professor Maxwell pointed out, it is a new movement. Now, some say this is mission impossible for his newly established party. Now, with the appointment of Edouard Philippe, does he have more chances, you think? Mr. Godeman, please.
He's certainly placing a very big bet. He can count on the logic of our Constitution. The logic of our Constitution is that once people have voted for a president, they want him to be able to exercise power, so they give him a majority at the legislative elections that follow. Maybe a few years later they vote the other way. But right now there is a dynamic and he's clearly exercising it. But he's really placing a very big bet because he's requiring from candidates who are coming to his party to stand for the election to leave other parties. So he's really requiring for people to burn their boats and come and become full-rank members of his own party. It's a very big bet. But we can also see that if he failed, let's say by a few seats in that bet, he would presumably have support from part of the right. I can't see the right staying together, and the fact that Mr. Juppé himself, the strong man of the right, at least in public opinion polls, sort of welcomed the nomination of Mr. Philippe and wished him good luck, indicates that even if Macron doesn't have a majority in Parliament, he will get support from part of the right.
Professor Maxwell, we were talking about two options that Macron might have. First of all, he has to get a parliamentary majority at the cost of losing his centrist position. The other is not to compromise, but to be subject to restrictions in Parliament as a result. Now, with the appointment of Edouard Philippe, do you think he still faces the same options? If not, what options would he have at this moment?
Oh, he definitely has a challenging few weeks and months ahead, if not years. As I said before, he really does not, he does not have a party. He does not even have a movement. He is a new person building support, and he had a certain percentage of the vote, 20-some-odd%, and he benefited from a series of lucky circumstances. He benefited from the controversy with François Fillon that couldn't have been foreseen, and then he benefited from running against someone like Le Pen, who has a strong backing, institutional machinery, years of work in politics, and he benefited from her still being a bit outside the mainstream. So he's found himself as president of France, and now he's going to have to construct all of this. And so he would prefer to be in the majority, but even then it's not clear what that majority would mean or what it would be, since it's cobbled together.
Can it be interpreted that he's trying to make use a little bit of the rising right-leaning sentiment of the electorate by choosing a conservative lawmaker to be his prime minister, Mr. Godeman?
Look, if you are pragmatic and you look at the opinion polls, the Socialist Party, which used to be the main party of the left, has about 7% of the voters, not more. While the conservative right, the parliamentarian right, still has 20% of the vote. That almost gives the result for somebody who said he was neither right or left. Then, if he has to push through the difficult reforms that he wants to push through, he has at least to be sure of his own followers. And the whole experience of the previous government was that the reforms were constantly criticized from the inside, from the support basis of Mr. Hollande by left-leaning socialists. So he's looking the other way, I think. He has, by the way, also got on board quite a few socialists who have really transferred.
Professor Maxwell, now we also know that Macron is expected to be holding talks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin, his first official trip after coming to power. In last week's TV debate, Marine Le Pen said if Macron were to win, Merkel would govern France. Will Merkel make room for her counterpart to co-lead the EU from the external front?
Well, there have been some reports recently that I think Macron is going to try to be diplomatic and not push too hard because Merkel has her own election to win first. So they're probably going to be a fairly peaceful and collaborative summer, and then perhaps get down to the real difficult discussions of how they should move forward with Eurozone reform and how that should look, assuming she wins. But at the moment, she cannot be too strong. She has to win her own election, and I'm sure she's happy, all else equal, to have Macron as opposed to Mélenchon or Le Pen in the Élysée.
So if she would be smart, she would be making, or at least appear to be making some room for Macron, so that Macron can also have more support domestically. Mr.
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Godeman, when Macron
Definitely.
delivered his first speech on Sunday, he said the world and Europe needs France more than ever. They need a strong France that is sure of its destiny. Now, between France and the EU, who needs the other more at this moment?
I thought you were going to ask between France and Germany. That probably would be
well,
more
Germany
accurate,
is kind of the face of the EU at this
in the present
moment.
circumstances. And I agree with my colleague that Macron has clearly decided to be careful and diplomatic until at least the German election comes through in the fall. I think the real answer is that without France, the EU would not go ahead because it would be an EU reduced to Germany and to much smaller or less important countries in terms of GDP. So it's good to see that there is firm support from France on European policies. Macron really, it's probably the first candidate for presidency who decides to push the European idea to a focus point, to such a focus point, especially given the fact that his chief opponent, Madame Le Pen, was an arch enemy of Europe. And he won on that basis, which is very important for the near future.
Mr. Professor Maxwell, let me ask you about the relationship between the United States and France. Now, US President Donald Trump has called to congratulate Macron for his win, but it was also widely held that Le Pen belonged to the same flock with Trump. So what does Macron's win would mean to France-US bilateral ties?
Predicting what's going to happen in my country has become extremely difficult over the past few months and years. It's very difficult to know what this means for Trump. What we can say is, on the one hand, he clearly he seemed to prefer Le Pen, and so he has some differences in an outlook with Macron. Macron is more of the globalist, internationalist, and may not share some of Trump's approaches. On the other hand, Macron is also someone who's friendly to business, wants to get business done. He's not Mélenchon. He's not someone who wants to end capitalism, and Trump clearly wants that. So there's probably potential for them to work together on certain issues, on economic issues. It all depends how things shape out on this side with Trump, and then of course how Macron spits in with Europe and the EU. So a mixed bag, but that's what we've come to expect in my country.
Okay, and Mr. Godeman, very quickly, 30 seconds maybe, what is your take about France's relationship with the United States in the years ahead?
I think there will be continuity on for example, international intervention, support in the Near East and North Africa. Macron has been keen to show that he will continue this policy of engagement that was the policy of Hollande, and that's the tough part where French and American policies coincide. On other issues, it's true, there could be problems, but I think around Mr. Trump, the arch conservatives will have to come to the realization that their predictions about Europe blowing apart and a kind of populist revolution sweeping through Europe is not happening. After the Netherlands, France.
Well, that is for sure not happening at this moment. Anyway, we have to leave it there. Many thanks, Francois Godeman and Rassan Maxwell, joining us for the program. And here is my last point. Remember what I said when Macron won the election, that although he has clinched an initial victory, he still has a long battle ahead to get his policies through. He talks about reforms, but are the ordinary people willing to pay the necessary price? Or will it simply be a case of new wine in an old bottle, that after the initial period of excitement, the electorate will discover that it is simply business as usual? Obviously, there is still a tough road ahead for Macron, for he needs to concentrate on the elections in the National Assembly, for without Parliament's support, it will be well nigh impossible for him to start to deliver on his promises. There's an old expression, may you live in interesting times. While seemingly a blessing, the expression is always used ironically, as interesting times from a historical perspective usually include disaster or disorder and conflict at least. I'd be willing to bet that right now Macron is wishing that the initial days of his presidency was slightly less interesting. That's all for this edition of The Point with me, Lu Xin. As always, follow me on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN Live to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.